Is this the dagger?
G'day guys, JB here, and we have reached the very end of the 23-24 NBA regular season. And with that, it is, without further ado, that we do a summary and a review of the season. Now, we'll only do the regular season in the sense of who the teams were, how they performed, how they finished off over the last 2 weeks, and in particular who I had as their best player on the season. We'll then have a look at the top 10 teams that finished in each conference, and of course, recording at the time of the final playing games, we'll also go through the the top 8 of each leftover conference heading into the postseason. So we'll get underway immediately, and we'll start in the Eastern Conference as we have all year with the Atlanta Hawks. In their last 9 games, they went 2-7, finished the year 36-46. Not really a great outcome, particularly with 2 leading guards on their team. Now, it was a bit of a toss-up towards the end there, and Dejounte Murray became very, very close to capturing that there. Now, to be fair, I'm also mentioning guys, regardless of how many games they've played. This is more about who the best player for the team was. This is not about making the All-NBA team, or the All-Defensive team, or the All-Rookie team, or winning an award. That will be in a separate video. So, with that, that is why I've selected Trae Young as the best player for the Hawks this year. Had him as their best player in 14 wins. He averaged 25.7 points, 2.6 rebounds, 10.8 assists, 1.3 steals, and 0.2 blocks a game. Over 4 turnovers, not great there. 43% from the field, 37.3 from deep, 85.5 from the free throw line. A year for Atlanta where realistically they wanted that record reversed. A bit of a tougher conference there in the East this year. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the very last time that we see Trae Young in an Atlanta Hawks uniform there. Obviously wasn't eligible for All-NBA selection, but I did have him responsible as leading the team to more wins than anyone else this year. Over to Boston, they finished with a season high across the entire league. 64-18 record, went 7-2 in their last 9 games, and their best player on the season, a guy who should be up there in MVP voting, a guy who should certainly be up there in All-NBA team selection, Jason Tatum, 26.9 points, 8.1 rebounds, 4.9 assists, 1 steal, 0.6 blocks, 2.5 turnovers a game. So really nice round of production of 27, 8, and 5 with less than 3 turnovers a game. 47.1 from the field, 37.6 from deep, and 83.3 from the free throw line. And I had him leading Boston to 27 wins this year. One of the preeminent players in the league, and certainly one of the preeminent teams. They're going to have a lot of different features. For me, they're going to have 2 All-NBA level players. They're certainly going to have at least 1 All-Defensive player in that team as well. A really nice year for Boston. Their best individual season since Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, and Paul Pierce. So a really big tick there. They are the raging favourites to come out of the East, and you would have to think if the Western Conference is an absolute battle, they may very well be the favourites to win it all by the time the NBA Finals roll around, if in fact they are there. Brooklyn went 3-5 in their last 8 games there, and they finished a very underwhelming 32-50. Ben Simmons certainly not being healthy. And I think a lot of players underperforming here for Brooklyn really proved the difference. Mikal Bridges, their best player on the season, 19.6 points, 4.5 rebounds, 3.6 assists, 1 steal, 0.4 blocks a game, 43.6 from the field, 37.2 from deep, and 81.4 from the free throw line. I had him as their best player in 11 wins. So, yeah, a really strange year for Brooklyn. I thought they might have been a little better than that. I thought you might have seen a little bit more oomph out of them. I thought they were going to be a real measuring stick sort of a team. That just wasn't to be the case, unfortunately, there. And they've got a little bit to do on the drawing board. We'll see what comes about it, but no doubt Brooklyn will be better next year, just to see how they really pull things out and see whether they blow things up, whether they add a piece. Really interesting stuff. The baby sister, or the baby brother, so to speak, of New York, certainly a big help there to potentially attract some targets. Of course, it does seem to be a bit more behind the scenes, though. Charlotte 3-6 in their last 9 games there, 21-61, an awful performance for them. Their best player, I hate to say it, it's Miles Bridges, 21 points, 7.3 rebounds, 3.3 assists, 0.9 steals, 0.5 blocks a game on 2 turnovers, 46.2 from the field, 34.9 from deep, 82.5 from the free throw line. Really underwhelming year for Charlotte. I think they're going to have an all-rookie first-team player, and I think they've got a really positive guard to be able to build around there in Brandon Miller. Beyond that, not much happening there for Charlotte. Chicago looked like they were going to break 500 there and really make things interesting. They weren't able to do it, but 3-5 in their last 8 games, 39-43 on the season, and I thought just overall DeMar DeRozan still remained their number one option and their best player on the year. 24 points, 4.3 rebounds, 5.3 assists, 1.1 steals and 0.6 blocks a game. You've got to remember, this is also with less than 2 turnovers a game, 48% from the field, 33.3 from deep, 85.3 from the free throw line. Best player in 13 wins, of course. Miles Bridges is their best player and only 5 wins up there for Charlotte. But never really any sort of question for me with Chicago. I think it's now just a mix. Will Zach LaVine be there next year? I mean, they threatened to trade him to Detroit and he took surgery, so that sort of gives you a key indicator where his head's at there. Of course, when we really go to look at things very, very shortly, Chicago are not going any further in the postseason. And I think that might have been the straw that breaks the camel's back. I think you keep an Andre Drummond. I think you keep a Kobe White. I think you keep an Alex Caruso. Desonmu really showed some sign there as well during the year. But the rest of the team, it's going to be an interesting question. What do you do with Vucevic? What do you do with DeRozan? Should have been a 500 year. LaVine not committing certainly hurt their case as well. Cleveland, they finished with the same sort of record over the last 2 weeks. They're 3-5, but they went 48-34 in the year. Despite the fact that he was injured and wasn't able to make the All-NBA first team there, or certainly make any of the All-NBA teams, it looked like he was going to sneak up there to that All-NBA first team with it being, positionless this year. Donovan Mitchell with another big year. 26.6 points, 5.1 rebounds, 6.1 assists, 1.8 steals, 0.5 blocks, less than 3 turnovers a game at 2.8. 46.2 from the field, 36.8 from deep, 86.5 from the free throw line, and I had him as their best player in 23 wins. Really, really interesting year for Cleveland. Looked like they were going to bottom out, and the talk was about blowing the team up before the All-Star break. Donovan Mitchell led them on a huge run there with the injuries of Garland and Mobley. Massive effort by him. Was tracking for All-NBA selection, there's no doubt about it. Really changed the narrative. Then he got injured again. Cleveland haven't been on the greatest of runs, and that conversation has returned, unfortunately, for Mitchell not being there. Now, where he is, I don't know. With the conversation surrounding LeBron James and Bronny James, who knows? But Donovan Mitchell still got plenty of value for this particular team. I think he's got plenty of value for any other team as well. We're still talking about a guy who's got a good 8-9 years under his belt before we really start looking at him as a second option anywhere. So lots of positives there for Cleveland. Certainly lots of positives for Mitchell. The postseason will be interesting for them. Detroit finished with one of the worst records of all time. They went 1-7 in their last 8 games and they posted a 14-68 record. Jalen Duren, for me, was their most valuable player on the year. 13.8 points, 11.6 rebounds, 2.5 assists, multiple double-double games. A real positive in a really dark corner there of the Eastern Conference. As I said, 13.8 points, 11.6 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 0.5 steals, 0.8 blocks on a little over 2 turnovers a game. Shot just under 62% from the field, 79% from the free throw line, and I had him responsible for 6 wins. Yes, I'm confident that Jalen Duren, despite the numbers, had a better year than Miles Bridges. Again, if you've seen plenty of my MVP videos, you'll understand the logic behind this. Numbers do end up speaking for themselves, but it's impact you have on winning, the impact you have on the game, all of that sort of thing. And yeah, the fact that Miles Bridges in the league still is a joke. Indiana, 5-2 in their last 7 games, 47-35 on the year, and Tyrese Halliburton an All-NBA year and a standout 20-10 season as well. 20.1 points, 3.9 rebounds, 10.9 assists. That's just a massive season right there. 1.2 steals, 0.7 blocks, 2.3 turnovers. So we're talking about a guy who's averaging 20 points, who's averaging, around at 11 rebounds, and he's not turning the ball over at a high rate. That is the sign of a really good offensive point guard there. One of the better pure point guards in the league. 1.2 steals, 0.7 blocks. You mentioned the turnovers there. 47.7 from the field is nice for a smaller guard. 36.4 from 3, really nice for a smaller guard. 85.5 from the free throw line is nice, and I had him responsible for 24 wins, one of the leading guards there in the Eastern Conference. Of course, the question for Indiana, what do you do now that you have Pascal Siakam? Because Siakam overshadowed Halliburton a fair bit towards the end of the season, there's no doubt about it. I think Pascal Siakam was their best player since he got traded there. I think Pascal Siakam was very much bordering on an All-NBA season this year. He played very well. Fortunately got traded. Really not a great look for him. The other question there is if Paul George looking to make a move, who do you give up? Obviously, you don't want to get rid of Halliburton. Obviously, you don't want to get rid of Siakam. You probably don't want to get rid of Miles Turner either. You know, you want to be loyal to that really key big who can defend inside, particularly with the conversation around rule changes. But it's going to be interesting to see how Indiana go in the postseason, and certainly going to be interesting to see what Indiana look like when they get towards free agency and towards the end of the year. For Miami, they went 6-3 in their last 9 games and salvaged a 46-36 record, and they will be in the major part of the postseason. Their best player for me in the regular season, though, Bam Adebayo, and I think he's been their best player consistently since the start of the NBA Finals last year. 19.3 points, 10.4 rebounds, 3.9 assists, 1.1 steals, 0.9 blocks, 2.3 turnovers. We're talking about an all-defensive selection year for Bam Adebayo, one of the better years that he's had of his career. 52.1 from the field, 35.7 from deep, and 75.5 from the free throw line. I had him responsible for 18 wins. Of course, there is a bit of a story right now with Jimmy Butler certainly not going to be playing in the first week of the postseason, and it looks like they're going to be shaping up against Boston. So that's going to make for a very, very interesting opening round. But for Miami, I think it's just going to be one of those things moving forward now that, okay, you've got some key players there. You've clearly got a culture that people will buy into. You've got a winning way that people will buy into. Now it's a matter of it being consistent through the regular season, really identifying yourself and not trying to rev things up towards the postseason, honestly. Although this is the thing with Miami, you can't count them out of any particular game or any particular series. So let's see what they can do. They've proven the doubters wrong a couple of times over the last few years. Of course, the 2020 NBA Finals, you look at 2021, didn't quite have a great year, but 2022 pushed it in the conference finals, and of course 2023 make an unlikely run to the NBA Finals. So that is the team that I will not sleep on at any point during this postseason. 3-0 down, I would still give them a chance. Certainly still give them a chance. Milwaukee, 3-6 on the last 2 weeks of the season, 49-33 for the season overall. No shock to say that Giannis Antetokounmpo was their best player on the year. 30.4 points, 11.5 rebounds, 6.5 assists, 1.2 steals, 1.1 blocks. All NBA first team selection, all defensive level selection. Continues to probably be the best two-sided ball player in the world right now. And unfortunately, it's become such a norm that no one particularly rates Giannis anymore as the best player on the planet. You know, I think at worst he's, the 4th or 5th best guy in the league. At worst. You want to make a case overall he's the best player in the NBA and the best player in the world, it's still there. 3.4 turnovers a game to go with all of that from Giannis. He becomes the first player ever to average 30 a game on 60% shooting. Pretty big tick in the box for me. 27.4 from deep, not ideal. Neither is the free throws at 65.7. But I had him leading Milwaukee to 32 wins this year. Chemistry is going to be a real issue here, and injury is going to be a real issue here. Giannis, with a calf strain, they are not going to worry. And they are not going to push themselves to get him back. If they have to lose a playoff series to keep Giannis healthy, continue to build this franchise, they'll do it. Because the last thing you want to see is someone like Giannis go out to the floor, pop an Achilles. Great, there you go. There goes all of next year. What are you doing with Damian Lillard at that point, who is really not happy putting up with Milwaukee? How do you deal with Chris Middleton, who's inconsistent with his injuries? Bobby Portis, a Sixth Man of the Year candidate there. Brook Lopez, still a really good defender, but at that point, you know, the driver of the Ferrari is no longer available, and he's potting around in a Corolla. It's not a really good look there for Milwaukee. Nearly a 50-win season. It's going to be interesting to see how their management of chemistry and injuries is, particularly for the postseason, but also particularly in the off-season. New York finished really, really strong, 6-3, and they cracked 50 wins. 50-32, and their best player in the season, Jalen Brunson, who has some serious All-NBA conversations going on right now, has some serious MVP ballot conversations going on right now. He had a really big year, 28.7 points, 3.6 rebounds, 6.7 assists per game, 0.9 steals, 0.2 blocks on 2.4 turnovers. Shot 47.9 from the field, 40.1 from deep, and 84.7 from the free throw line. That is a massive year for an undersized guard. Chip on the shoulder, one of the biggest media markets, if not the biggest media market in the world, on his shoulders, and he has had the Garden rocking and rolling with those 25 wins that he has led them in. With his second best player dropping out, might add as well. So really nice year for Jalen Brunson. Really happy to see him playing. It's good to see New York up and about. And it's a traditional New York team. There have been other New York teams they've tried to build around a bit of flash and style and stuff over the last couple of years, and certainly over the last decade. This is a workhorse team. And that's particularly what New Yorkers like about their basketball and basketball players. Hard workers, get the job done, nose to the grindstone, competing, a little bit of style, but certainly more substance. If you can play in New York and get an ovation in New York, you've made it, and that's certainly where Jalen Brunson sits right now, a genuine cult hero, the likes of John Starks and Allen Houston, those kind of players right now. For Orlando, they had a really nice year. They stayed above 500. They're going to make the postseason, 5-4 in their last 9 games. As I mentioned, 47-35. And a man I think is going to be very, very unlucky, along with another man I'll talk about in the Western Conference, to not make the All-NBA first team. And that is Paolo Banchero. Certainly going to be All-NBA second team for me. Or certainly at worst should be no worse than the second team, in my opinion. 22.6 points, 6.9 rebounds, 5.4 assists, 0.9 steals, 0.6 blocks on 3.1 turnovers. You've got to remember it's his second year, 45.5 from the field, 33.9 from deep, 72.5 from the stripe. I had him as their best player in 27 wins. Yes, I had him as a better year than Jalen Brunson, which might shock some people. That's just how I feel. And the scary part is that this Magic team, as it is at the moment, is only in its second team, with a guy leading it who is only in his second year. This is insane sort of stuff. And the problem is no one pays attention to the whole league. And this is where everyone goes, why is everyone talking about Banchero? Or why is everyone talking about Orlando? It's because no one watches the league. So no one really gives a damn. But there's no doubt for me that Banchero was a top 10 player this year. There's no doubt for me that he should be at least All-NBA second team. Again, second year he's doing this. Like, that's incredible stuff. Of course, you've got to remember they're still talking about Anthony Edwards. They're still talking about LaMelo Ball. They're still talking about Victor Wembanyama. All of this stuff that's going on in Banchero is just quietly flying under the radar. I did mention it earlier in the year. Orlando needed someone to step up and take the reins of this particular team, and that's exactly what he's done. He's got some really nice support, but he has really stepped up and said, I am the man on this team. I am number one, and we will roll from there. So great to see him stepping up. A really nice year for Orlando. I don't know exactly how they're going to go in the postseason, but you would have to suggest that, as long as they're competitive, as long as they're having a go, then, there's no real reason why, they can't try and sneak a few wins in a series. There's no reason why they can't try and sneak a series in general. So really, really nice stuff there for Orlando. Let's hope that they can be competitive. For Philadelphia, absolutely rallied home, flew home like a freight train, won their last 8. Finished the year 47-35, and this is what's going to shake a lot of people. With 28 wins, I had Joel Embiid as their best player. 28 wins. And he played a little over half the season. This was, for me, had he been healthy, clearly the best year of Embiid's career. Not even close. He'd be on both by all defensive and all NBA teams. Huge year for Embiid where he was available. 34.7 points, 11 rebounds, 5.6 assists, 1.2 steals, 1.7 blocks, 3.8 turnovers, but high usage and getting it done on both ends. And you've got to look at the efficiency with the ball in hand. 52.9 from the field, 38.8 from deep as a big, 88.3 from the free throw line as a big. Really incorporated the passing, really, a 3-level scorer in that sense, and playing all-world defense. Would not have had a qualm if Philadelphia had finished top 2 and this guy would have been close to leading them to 40 wins. Wouldn't have had an issue with that MVP conversation at that point. Massive year for Embiid. Chemistry's now your issue. Fitness is now your issue. But you've got to think they do look like a far better team than before Embiid left. So they're going to be a really interesting low seed. A really interesting low seed. I would not want to be a higher seed that's had a bit of a rougher run running into Philadelphia. That is a scary proposition. It's going to be a hell of a battle in the first round no matter who they take on, but scary proposition right there. Toronto 2-7 on the year, 25-57. They traded away Pascal Siakam. They traded away OG Anunoby. They did get Quickly and Barrett in return. Really wasn't much of a year, and the fact that he hung around with 7 wins is the only reason Pascal Siakam doesn't get this nod. Scotty Barnes got the nod as an all-star, and I think he's had a really nice year, really good growth year. Again, Toronto win 40-plus games. You're talking about an all-defensive candidate here. His numbers just aren't substantial enough compared to other players I'm going to talk about. But 19.9 points, 8.2 rebounds, 6.1 assists, 1.3 steals, 1.5 blocks, and 2.8 turnovers. Really good stuff there. 47.5 from the field, 34.1 from deep, 78.1 from the free throw line. Barnes is going to be a player they're going to keep, they're going to try and build around, and they're going to have to do it pretty quickly. They can't afford to sit there and waste Scotty Barnes going, geez, I don't know whether he's going to hang around or do we keep him? How do we go with that? They've really got to focus on that one there for Scotty Barnes. If they can turn that team around by at least 10 wins, that'll be really good next year. You're going to put them in real good stead for a playoff position the year after. Hopefully by then Barnes has really primed himself ready to go. For Washington, finished with the second worst record in the league. They were 1-7 in their last 8. Kyle Kuzma continues to be their best player. Their next closest was Jordan Poole. And Kuzma only had 8 wins. Poole had 3. Kuzma on the year, 22.2 points, 6.6 rebounds, 4.2 assists, 0.5 steals, 0.7 blocks, less than 3 turnovers at 2.7, 46.3 from the field, 33.6 from deep, 77.5 from the free throw line. Again, had him responsible for 8 wins. Washington, one of the 2 worst teams in the league. No questions asked. Of course, with the Eastern Conference wrapped up, it is time to look at what the first round of the playoffs is going to be in the Eastern Conference. Of course, we'll start with 1 versus 8, and that'll be Boston taking on Miami. That is an 18-game difference, 64-18, 46-36. Of course, the Heat winning through to the play-in, from the play-in to get that game. Lost to Philadelphia, then defeated the Bulls. Going to be an interesting series. No Jimmy Butler becomes a real factor in this one here. I think Kristaps Porzingis becomes huge, and so does Drew Holiday. Pretty easy stuff. I think Boston get the win. I'd give it a gentleman's. I'd give it 5 games there. Second series, the second seed, the New York Knicks taking on the 7th seed, Philadelphia 76ers, 50-32 versus 47-35. This ultimately comes down to 2 factors here. The health, well, 3 factors. From New York's side, can you just get a win? Can you do it without Julius Randle? Can you not cave under pressure, particularly now as that second seed? Second factor, the health of Joel Embiid. And thirdly, the performance of Joel Embiid. Not necessarily hand in hand, but certainly going to be a factor at some point together. That's a really tough one to call. A really, really tough series to call. I think if Philadelphia are going to win it, they're going to have to win it strong early. And same with New York. Real toss of the coin. I'm not sure who wins that one. I have a feeling it's only going to go 6 games, though. I have a feeling it'll only go 6 games. New York versus the 3rd seed Bucks versus the 6th seed Pacers. So Milwaukee versus Indiana. Milwaukee home court advantage, 49-33. Indiana 47-35. Again, that really does come down to health. If there isn't a lot of health, if there is some inconsistencies there for the Bucks, I think you will see the Pacers get the win in that series. And I wouldn't be surprised if they won it in 6. However, if Giannis is healthy at some stage, if the Bucks have that lead, we'll see. Of course, you've got to remember with Giannis that the return of Giannis could very well be predicated on the success of the Bucks. If the Bucks are down 3-0, you don't bring Giannis back. If the Bucks win the first round, you wait until you see what their results in the second round are. That's realistically how they're going to have to do it. I think that is another 6-game series. And I think at the moment, depending on health, depending on chemistry, despite the fact that Milwaukee as a unit have actually been together better, Damian Lillard is known to hit some big shots there in the postseason where he needs to. I would actually favour the Pacers if health is on their side in 6 games. In saying that, Milwaukee, they're the 3rd seed for a reason. First round as well there in the Eastern Conference, Cleveland versus Orlando, 4th versus 5th. It's a 1-game difference. You'd have to think that Cleveland get the advantage, but they certainly didn't perform in the first round last year. I like the way Orlando are. They are just young. That's a real toss-up series. All I can really comment on that one, if I'm not going to go out on a limb, I'm not going to be that stupid. Just based on what I can see, it's a really tough series to pick. I think that's your first 7-game series there of the postseason. Looking on the other side of the board, it may very well happen one other time there in the first round, but certainly in the Eastern Conference, I think your 7-game series right there in the first round will be Cleveland and Orlando. Honestly, whoever hits the final blow in that one, I would say. Cleveland may very well collapse if no one's able to compete, but then Orlando is young and inexperienced. So I think you've got a 7-game series on your hand right there in the East. Moving over to the West, we'll start with Dallas. They went 6-3 in their last 9 games, finished 50-32, same record there as the New York Knicks. No shock there. Luka Doncic, the scoring champion for the year. I had him as their best player with 34 wins. I had him as one of the 3 best players on the planet this year. Luka with 33.9 points, 9.2 rebounds, and 9.8 assists. Yes, around a 34, 9, and 10 on the year. Huge. 1.4 steals, 0.5 blocks, 4 turnovers, but you've got to remember it's a lot of ball in hand, and that's a pretty efficient year at 48.7 from the field, 38.2 from deep, and 78.6 from the free throw line. Can Dallas be composed? Can they utilise the nice pieces that they've got around them here right now to make a bit of a run in the postseason? They're going to be matching up against the Clippers. The Clippers aren't at 100%. They've got some known underwhelming players in the postseason. Kyrie Irving is a known player in the postseason. Luka Doncic can put up numbers, has needed some support in a couple of series there, which is why he hasn't had any success. But Dallas with a really nice year, Luka with a really nice year. Good to see Kyrie back playing some consistent basketball. We'd like to see him out there a little bit more. Going to be interesting to see how Dallas go with a really nice year for them. Denver finished as the second seed, 6-2 in their last 8 games, 57-25 on the year. And in the minds of most, the man who's going to win his third MVP in 4 years was their best player. I had him at 42 wins, Nikola Jokic. 26.4 points, 12.4 rebounds, 9 assists, 1.4 steals, and 0.9 blocks on 3 turnovers. There's not much more that needs to be said about Jokic offensively. He's one of the biggest outliers in the history of the sport on the offensive end. Really, really simple stuff when you want to put it like that. 58.3 from the field, 35.9 from deep, 81.7 from the free throw line. I thought he probably should have been closer to the MVP argument last year in the sense of who was there. I actually had him, I believe, 3rd or 4th in the MVP argument last year. I have him certainly in my top 3 this year. I think you can probably work it out as we go along here, but certainly had him in my top 3. Just another consistent year. You're going to see him all NBA first team. People don't like it. He's just producing winning. He's leading a really positive culture. They look like they were going to slip a little bit here, Denver. They've had another nice year. They're going to have home court advantage bar 2 playoff series if they keep pushing through. It's just a matter of maintaining health and competing. They've got a really nice matchup in the first round as well. But 42 wins there for Denver. I think they're probably going to have an All-NBA defensive selection on that squad as well. Golden State, they rallied home hard. They obviously didn't make the postseason, but rallied home hard. 7-3 in their final 10 games, 46-36 on the year. Steph Curry, 26 wins. They didn't quite make that top 8 seed there, didn't make the official playoffs. I still would have him amongst any of the better players in the league this year. 26.4 points, 4.5 rebounds, 5.1 assists, 0.7 steals, 0.4 blocks, less than 3 turnovers, 45% from the field, 40.8 from deep, 92.3 from the free throw line. So he had a down year on field goal percentage essentially there for Steph. Tried his best, just couldn't get it over the line. It's a really, really interesting question for Golden State as to what they do next. Who do you keep? Who do you get rid of? I think you've only got 4 absolute certainties on that team for me. I think it's Steph Curry. I think it's Andrew Wiggins. I think it's Kevon Looney. I think it's Kuminga. They're the 4 guys, if I'm Golden State, that I'm keeping. Steph will be a ride and die with Clay and a ride and die with Dre for the rest of their careers. There's no doubt about it. They won 4 championships together. That's, of course they're not going to, want to bust that up. But if you are management, you do go to Steph Curry and you lay the checkbook open and you just ask him, what do you want? Who do you need? What are we going to do? You're the greatest player in the history of this franchise. You're the greatest shooter in the history of the league. You're the 2nd greatest point guard of all time. Got to do something for you. And I think that's the least they can do in offering that courtesy to him. For Houston, they didn't make the play-in tournament, but my God, they exceeded expectations this year. For a team that looked like they were going to almost end up being 20 games below 500 after an injury to their best player. They made a really, really big run. Had some crucial losses there in the last couple of weeks that all but cost them the play-in tournament. 41-41 on the year, 3-6 on the closing week, as I mentioned. Jalen Green with a really nice run. Fred VanVleet with a really nice run. And Dylan Brooks, huge in joining that team as well, but my best player for them this year, a guy who I thought got an all-star snub at the time, still think he had it then, and probably would have been close in my All-NBA selections for the year if he'd have stayed healthy. Alfred Şengün, 21.1 points, 9.3 rebounds, 5 assists, a massive year for him, 1.2 steals, 0.7 blocks, less than 3 turnovers, 53.7 from the field, will improve his 3-point shooting at 29.7 and should improve his free throw shooting as well as the 3-point shooting there at 69.3. I had him at 15 wins. He had a really nice year. Houston broke 500. That is not what I expected to see from the Rockets. I would have been thinking that next year or maybe the year after, that's a 500 team after everyone develops. Now, all of a sudden, when you look at the injuries, when you look at the opportunities that are possessed around the conference, there's no reason why Houston can't be thinking playoffs next year. Healthy team, there's no reason they can't think about playoffs. A really nice year for Houston. Solid foundation set. Very, very thankful the team did not trade away Jalen Green before the deadline. A nice run for them. And when you look at it, they only finished 10 games below the Clippers, who went 51-31 in the year, 5-4 on the final 2 weeks. And their best player this year, a man who himself will be looking at All-NBA nods, has just been nominated and selected for Team USA in the Olympics. And that was Kawhi Leonard, a massive year for him. 23.7 points, 6.1 rebounds, 3.6 assists, 1.6 steals and 0.9 blocks. Less than 2 turnovers, 52.5 from the field, 41.7 from deep, 88.5 from the free throw line. Was the reason they won at least 20 of their games. He was huge. At one point there, Kawhi Leonard was the most efficient offensive perimeter player in the league and was on a run that no player had ever had. As far as 25, 5 and 5 on his shooting splits that he was having at that particular point. Huge year for Kawhi Leonard, the best year he's had since the Raptors. I know he was there when the Clippers were like that first year that the Clippers had him, but I think this has been his best year. There's probably been a lot of alleviated pressure. You had a James Harden as a facilitator. You had a Russell Westbrook as an energy guy. You have Paul George having another really big year for him. Is it his last in LA? That's another thing they'll have to worry about. The real question is, do they get out of the first round knowing that they have the perennial playoff issues of James Harden, knowing there is some injury concern around Kawhi? They're playing Dallas. They're playing Luka, who now has Kyrie, a known playoff performer. Becomes a very different conversation right there. They're going to be in a really tough battle. I hinted before there was 2 7-game series, one in each conference, and I think the Clippers and Dallas may very well be it. We'll get to that a little bit later. But a nice year from Kawhi Leonard, a nice year from the Clippers. They put themselves in contention. At one point there, it looked like they were going to be in contention for that number 1 seed. They just weren't able to hold on. For the Lakers, they came home like a steam train as well. 7-2 in the last 9 games, 47-35 on the season. And for me, their best player, a man who should be among the all-defensive selections, a man that should also be amongst the all-NBA selections, a guy who's very unlucky to not be in the top 10 of my MVP race this year, hint, hint. That was Anthony Davis. The best year that he's put together, top to bottom since 2020, and the most consistent on-court appearances that he's put together since 2017-18. They've easily been the 3 best years. These have easily been the 3 best years of Anthony Davis's career. Unfortunately for Davis, it doesn't stand out as much anymore with Jokic playing well, with Giannis playing well, with Embiid playing well, with Shea playing well, with Luka playing well. All of these guys having really fantastic years. It's part of the reason it doesn't stand out. He was tremendous. Clearly the best player for the Lakers for me. 24.7 points, 12.6 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 1.2 steals, 2.3 blocks. Anthony Davis has been 2 blocks, 1 steal a game for his career. Just over 2 turnovers a game, 55.6 from the field, 27.1 from deep, 81.6 from the free throw line. Just a really, really solid year once again for Anthony Davis. It's going to be a matter of what the Lakers can do. Of course, they will be dreading their first round matchup. I don't think I need to outline much more than that for you to have an idea about who they will probably be playing in that particular matchup. Now, how they battle that, I don't know. How they contend, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. But Anthony Davis is going to need to be on. LeBron James is going to need to be on. D'Angelo Russell's had a really nice year. Austin Reeves has contributed nicely. Rui Hachimura's had some nice moments as well. Is this the last year we see LeBron in a Lakers jersey? I don't know. A lot of questions there for the Lakers. They've got plenty going on for them. It's going to be a really, really interesting playoffs moving forward there. For Memphis, they had a really rough year. I think they set the all-time record for the amount of players used in a single year through injuries. Over 30 players used by them. 27-55 in the year, 3-6 to close out the season. And I still had Desmond Bain, who essentially did not provide any salient substance as an impact player beyond his injury at the very, it was November or December when he got injured. And I had him as 9 wins. So that should tell you the kind of impact that he was having. He was having a really nice year. I thought he was probably going to be in line towards that most improved player there. 23.7 points, 4.4 rebounds, 5.5 assists, 1 steal, 0.5 blocks, 2.7 turnovers, 46.4 from the field, 38.1 from deep, 87 from the free throw line. Memphis are a team right now that, you know, when they get everyone back, when they get everyone healthy, you're looking at them and going, yeah, this could be a team. This could be a genuine playoff team. Houston's won as well. You're like, wow, that could be a really genuine playoff team. But then you have to work out whereabouts in the shuffle they'll fit. And that's where it becomes a really interesting and an arduous exercise to an extent. So let's see what they can do. Let's see how they bounce back health-wise. Of course, Ja Morant had some really nice impact plays when he was playing. Brandon Clark trying to have some, they've got these really nice core guys. They just weren't on the court. It's made it really difficult. So to get away with 27 wins with 30 used injured players, compared to some other teams around the league, kudos to Memphis. They've got a bit of work to do, but I'm sure they can bounce back. Minnesota, they missed top gong by a game, but they were really right up there and thereabouts for most of the season. And still are. Top seed was 57 wins. They finished 56-26, 5-4 on the week. Anthony Edwards rolling towards All-NBA selection, rolling towards the Olympics, 25.9 points, 5.4 rebounds, 5.1 assists, 1.3 steals, 0.5 blocks. Anthony Edwards made a big step last year. No one paying attention because the whole story was that Karl Anthony Towns wasn't there. Not that they were winning. It was the fact that Karl Anthony Towns simply wasn't there. 2.8 turnovers a game to go with 1.1 steals and 0.7 blocks. Sorry, my apologies there. 1.3 steals and 0.5 blocks a game, 3.1 turnovers. 46.1 from the field, 35.7 from deep, 83.6 from the free throw line. The big thing for Edwards, he just showed a dynamic in his game. Just showed the ability to play, I can sit on the perimeter or I can attack the rim. Really showed some more intent defensively. Not a great defender, but a good defender. A guy that's going to hold you accountable. He's not going to necessarily lock you down, but certainly hold you accountable. Rudy Gobert, a really, really nice season defensively for him. You would think he's probably going to win his 4th Defensive Player of the Year. I dare say he's only going to win it because of the rankings of his team, might I point out. Otherwise, there is another guy from France who's probably going to have this award on lock at least for 5 of the next 10 years. And that's probably understating it. That's the kind of impact that particular individual can have. Karl Anthony Towns, when he comes back, what kind of an impact does he have? The general core of that Minnesota team, they've been one of, if not the best defensive team in the league as well. That'll hold them in good stead. The only thing that's going to hurt is they're only going to have the first round of the postseason, realistically, to be the number 1 team there as far as home court advantage. So it will just be a matter now, really, how do they sit, how do they fare out? If you're a second round of the playoffs, depending on who you play, you're going to be going to the Mile High City, you're going to be heading to Oklahoma City, and then, vice versa, you could be playing one of those other 2 teams in the third round. And then, ultimately, if you do make it right through, you've got to play on the parquet more times than you have to play in Minnesota. So it would be a really, really interesting look. Of course, historically, it would be a great look to see the finals between Minnesota and Boston. Hasn't happened. Between playing in the state of Minnesota and the state there of New England, of Massachusetts, I should say. Haven't seen those kind of finals there since 1960. Massive historical implications there. So Minnesota, a really nice year, finished with a 3rd seed. New Orleans managed to get through, but their main man is really the injury cloud and concern. 4-6 in the last 10. They made it through the play-in. 49-33 in the year. Zion Williamson with his best season to date. 22.9 points, 5.8 rebounds, 5.5 assists, 1 steal, 0.7 blocks, less than 3 turnovers. 57% from the field, 33.3 from deep, 70.2 from the free throw line. Zion, ball in hand. Enough said. Turned into the team's point guard, got everybody involved. CJ McCollum bounced back from punctured lung issues earlier in the year. He looked really nice. Brandon Ingram, when he was on the floor, looked really nice. Jonas Valanciunas looked really nice. Herb Jones looked really nice. Dyson Daniels, all of those guys, that entire team looked really, really nice when Zion was running the crew. Just missed out on 50 wins, which is really going to bite them on the backside, particularly when you look, they could have been well over 50 wins. That was the pace they were playing, but injury concerns and rotation concerns at times just proved to be the difference. Ultimately, Zion's brought in. That's been major. Unfortunately, now has a hamstring tweak going into the first week of the playoffs, but it's good to see that he's bought in, good to see that he's paying attention, good to see that he's trying his best. Yeah, really, really nice stuff there from Zion. Good to have him out on the floor, good to have him playing well. What can they do in the first round if he's out with his hamstring complaint? I don't know. Was this the final year that you really run that risk? I don't know. There was a lot of criticism when they lost their first playing game, but I think realistically, if you're going to see him in the first round, they're going to be playing well. You might need to make a couple of adjustments, but you're clearly on the right track. It's now just get him strong, get him fit. There's a reason he was shown as a generational talent. Clear reason. For Oklahoma City, they bounced back tremendously considering they didn't even make the postseason last year. They snagged the number 1 seed in the West. 6-3 in their last 9. And 44 wins, keeping in mind that I had 27 for Anthony Edwards and 18 to Zion Williamson. 44 wins to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's had the best two-way shooting guard season the league has seen since Dwayne Wade 15 years before. Shai had 30.1 points, 5.5 rebounds, 6.2 assists, 2 steals and 0.9 blocks. I think he'll get a nod on both sides of the ball for All-NBA selection. 2.2 turnovers is huge. 53.5 from the field is huge. 35.3 from deep is pretty consistent. 87.4 from the free throw line is elite. That's the season Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had. So when you hear people talking about, I don't know if he's done enough, it doesn't really impress me. What is this guy meant to do? What is this team meant to do? Okay, I get it. You've got Chet Holmgren, one of the Rookie of the Year candidates. Certainly not the Rookie of the Year, which says a lot because he had a really nice Rookie Year. You've had a Jalen Williams playing well. You've had Carson Wallace playing well. Lou Dort still playing well. Josh Giddey ended up playing well towards the back end of the season. Plenty of options there for Oklahoma City as they are as a team. Shai's the leader of that. And we are still somehow having a conversation. He needs to do more. What does he need to do? Outline what he needs to do more. Does he need to average 35 a game? Because if he averaged 35 a game with those numbers, yeah, he's the MVP of the league. Personally, I didn't have anyone leading their team to more wins. Read into that as you wish. But a massive year for OKC. They're going to have the number 1 spot in the postseason, bar one team. Massive for them. See how they can go. Can they deliver when it matters? Are they too young? Who knows? I think it's going to be them and Orlando that you get that real measuring stick of as to what the East and West is going to look like for the next 5 or 6 years. It's going to be a really, really interesting postseason for them. Sam Presti and the team have done very, very well, and they still have plenty of draft stock to roll in. The best 5th grader and 8th grader belong to the Oklahoma City Thunder right now. It's insane. Some massive work there by Presti. They've built a young, active roster on both sides of the ball who can play all areas of their offense, and yet here's this guy being the number 1 man. It's a huge year for OKC, a massive year for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Back-to-back All-NBA first-team selections, you would suspect for him. Difference being that I don't need to worry about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and I don't need to worry about Luka Doncic not being in the postseason this year because they're there. It makes selecting them a lot easier. Phoenix 6-2 in their last 8 games. They went 49-33 on the year, and Kevin Durant was their best player, which says a lot because I don't necessarily think Kevin Durant was their most valuable, but I certainly think he was their best player. I think it's very much a similar situation as to when he was in Golden State. I think Devin Booker is the most valuable player to the Phoenix Suns franchise. I've got no issues in saying that. I've got no hesitation in saying that. But to me, there's also no doubt that much like Golden State, they did need something to keep getting over the hump. And that piece is Kevin Durant. Really simple stuff there. 27.1 points, 6.6 rebounds, 5 assists, 0.9 steals, 1.2 blocks, a little over 3 turnovers a game. Nearly got the 50-40-90 club, 52.3 from the field, 41.3 from deep, 85.9 from the free throw line. Best player in 23 wins. Durant, the Slim Reaper, got his games up, got his points up. At one point there, looked like he was going to have 50-50-90 splits. That, of course, tailed off. But I think the big key here at the moment for Phoenix is that you do have 4 really capable players who can score without the ball in hand. You've got Allen, Grayson Allen, who's had a tremendously good year from outside on the perimeter. You've had Bradley Beal, who's pinched really well. Devin Booker had a really nice year. And, of course, Nurkic playing that point forward role when he needed to and really facilitating out of the post, grabbing boards, doing what he needed to do for Phoenix. They've got a really deep starting 5. Does tail off a lot from there. But it's that elite level at the top end that does make them a real concern and a really tough team to gauge. Let's see how they go in the postseason is the ultimate question there, because they're a team that if they're hot enough, they're going to win a lot of games. They're also a team, if they're cold enough, they're not going to get out of the first round. Doesn't matter who their matchup is. So a really, really big first round coming up from them. And from everything on my estimation, they're going to run into one of the best defensive teams in the league in that first round. Genuine litmus test there for the Suns. Portland, one of the worst teams in the league. Robert Williams' injury was massive there. Scoot Henderson not being up to par was massive there as well. They've uncovered a couple of pieces of talent, but as I said all year, just a bunch of misfits that couldn't coordinate themselves to get to where they needed to be. 2-6 over the last 2 weeks. 21 and 61 on the season. Jeremy Grant had about a 3-week patch, which to me was still enough to be their best player all year. 6 wins, 21 points, 3.5 rebounds, 2.8 assists, 0.8 steals, 0.6 blocks, 2.1 turnovers, 45.1 from the field, 40.2 from deep, and 81.7 from the free throw line. And Portland's going to be really interesting. Robert Williams coming back into that team makes it a good problem to have if DeAndre Ayton's playing well. But Scoot Henderson's not ready. This is the example of, there's generational money when you come out. That's great. But your generational money will only get you so far if you're not good enough. Scoot Henderson could be good enough, but he's not right now. And then you've got Brandon Miller, who's playing really well in comparison. You've got Chet Holmgren, who's playing well in comparison. And you've got Victor Wembanyama, who's being touted as a potential podium finish in the history of the game when his career's done. So it's a lot to compete with, but you've got to go at your own pace. And NIL money allows you to go at your own pace. And the increasing contracts in the NBA is going to allow you to go at your own pace. This isn't no scope on a rookie deal like the mid to early 90s. This is, you're coming into the league, regardless of where you come in the draft, and you're a millionaire. If you're a top 5 pick, you're no worse than $5 million a year. What are you doing? Wait until you're absolute certainty and ready to go. Get that sort of money, get your NIL money, get your endorsements, and go from there. I just think Portland have fired way too quick on this one here. They're a group of misfits that just need a bit of work. Sacramento, they ended up slipping to the 9th seed, and it did cost them. They will not be a part of the postseason. 4-5 in their last 9 games, did not win through in the play-in, went 46 and 36 on the year. De'Aaron Fox has not signed back yet. He may very well do. That may change how this team looks. But right now, it's not looking as positive as I think they thought it was going to be. So all of a sudden, you're talking about a guy here. Don't know how it's going to look for him, or certainly look for the team. But he wasn't their best player. Their best player was Domantas Sabonis, who for me is still going to be pushing towards that All-NBA selection at some stage. 19.4 points, a league-leading 13.7 rebounds, 8.2 assists. I rounded 19, 14, and 8. Now, Sabonis had 18 and 13 and 6, or 5, I think it was, in Indiana. And really showed some signs there, and no one thought anything of it. And they thought that Indiana had to really get rid of him. Now, granted, the trade has somewhat worked out both ways. You've got the league leader in assists traded for the league leader in rebounds. They swap teams and their teams get instantly better. I get it and I appreciate it, but you've got to make postseason. And the real question now becomes of what pieces do you put around? There was talk Keegan Murray was leaving. There was talk Harrison Barnes was leaving. There's talk that De'Aaron Fox is not going to return to the team. You lose all those guys and you become a completely different franchise very, very quickly. Malik Monk, really nice 6-man of the year run. That's not enough to justify him getting into the starting lineup, and it certainly doesn't improve this team. So an interesting year for Sacramento. I mean, we're talking about teams that made 500 and didn't make a play-in tournament. That was the sort of conference you had over in the West this year. So, make of that as you wish. Particularly when you look at the fact that Houston very well could have continued on their way to make the play-in tournament or make the playoffs. Vice versa with a healthy Memphis. With Memphis, how do you look at them? Really tough to see. But Sacramento, I don't know. They needed more 3 and D guys. They didn't get them. They haven't had any success. It's a tough one. It's a really tough one. They're going to have a really interesting off-season, Sacramento. I think the Beam team won't be anymore. They're going to be a really different dynamic and a different complexity to what their team is going to look like. Last 2 teams here in the West, the Spurs, as I mentioned, would have been 20 wins better if they'd have had some veteran experience around the team. They didn't go for it, but they did show signs over the back end of the year. They were 4-4 in their last 8 games, and there's no doubt about it. Their best player was the Rookie of the Year and a guy who would win the Defensive Player of the Year if his team had won more than 22 games. Victor Wembanyama. For a rookie year, 21.4 points, 10.6 rebounds, 3.9 assists, 1.2 steals, and 3.6 blocks a game. This is the worst version we're going to see of Wemby, the most inefficient version we're going to see of Wemby. And he was still 46.5 from the field, 32.5 from deep, and 79.6 from the free throw line. And we didn't really see his offensive game activate until the back end of the season. But defensively, it's not going to be a worry. If the Spurs are going to build a team around this guy and go, hey, guess what? We're going to give you 36 minutes and we're going to give you more touches. Good luck. That's That's 50 wins. That's 50 wins with a decent team. And then you go on the Duncan run. He had the third best rookie year in Spurs history. He's probably going to be all defensive. He has to be an all defensive team for me. He's going to win the Rookie of the Year. A lot of upside to the Spurs if they can manage it correctly. But that's the key, managing it correctly. And finally, Utah. They really made a run towards 500 there at one point and absolutely tailed off. 2-6 in their last 8, finished 31-51. And at one point there, it did look like they were going to be the best team to be a real upset chance to get into the play-in tournament. They didn't do it. Lauri Markkanen, their best player in the year, 23.2 points, 8.2 rebounds, 2 assists there. Of course, for Sabonis, I had him at 22 wins. I had Wemby at 14 wins. Lauri Markkanen, their best player, at 12 wins. 23.2 points, 8.2 rebounds, 2 assists, 0.9 steals, 0.5 blocks, 1.2 turnovers. Really pushing that 50-40-90 club once again. 48% from the field, 39.9 from deep, 89.9 from the free throw line. Utah have cultivated their pieces. That is all they've done. They've cultivated their pieces. They're now ready to move them. And I think you're going to see some movement with them. I think you're going to see some movement with Sacramento. You'll probably see some coordination with these last 4 teams I've mentioned, really. They're the 4 teams. If you're going to look across the entire conference there of the West, as I go through everybody there outside of Memphis, will pretty much stay the same. You might get a little bit out of Houston, but they've got a nice core. You'd have to say when you really shift and chop and change some pieces there of Portland, Sacramento, the Spurs and Utah, you do probably get some more balanced and interesting lineups and probably some more competitive games out of all of them. Just an interesting year for Utah. They're not going to do anything special. As we look at the first round of the playoffs in the West, starting off, the number 1 seed Thunder, the number 8 seed Pelicans. I think the Thunder win it. It may go 6 games if you can get something out of Brandon Ingram and you can get something out of CJ McCollum, but beyond that, it's really going to be interesting. For me, it's probably a 5-game series to the Thunder. Pretty easy to move on from that one. Nuggets and Lakers, I've got no reason to believe the Nuggets don't win in 5. History just tells us that. I don't see anything the Lakers have done that is going to change the way Denver play. Really simple stuff. The defensive battle from the Timberwolves versus the offensive juggernaut of the Suns, that's a 6-game series. I would have to favour, if Karl Anthony Towns is going to be back and creating a little bit of havoc and force some accountability on the perimeter there for the Suns, I'd probably do favour the Timberwolves. But if the defense is slumping there from the Timberwolves and you're not getting that performance out of the players that you need, the Suns could win it too. I think that's a 6-game series. It's a real toss of the coin. Clippers, Mavs, genuine 7-game, a genuine toss of the coin. It's really interesting there. I think things are more debatable, certainly over in the East by a series. I think your first 2 series there, I think in the West here, you've got the Thunder that are going to beat the Pelicans. I think the Nuggets are going to beat the Lakers. A lot of circumstances and a lot of balls in the air trying to juggle right now between the Clippers and the Mavs as to who's going to have what with that particular season as well. Really, really interesting look. Don't know how it's going to pan out. It's going to be really, really tough in those 2 middle series. I think it's a 6-gamer there, Timberwolves Suns. I think it's 7 games, Clippers Mavs. That all comes down to health as well, particularly from the Clippers standpoint. Because if Kawhi's not well, then I'd probably give that one to the Mavs in 6. Kawhi's healthy, Clippers in 7. So a really interesting look at how this one's going to pan out over in the postseason there. Anyway, guys, thank you for tuning in. That is my wrap on the regular season. I will get some awards out and about when the nominations start landing from the NBA. They will be in the next couple of days, and at that point there, I'll run through my MVP race. And we'll also top it off as well with my All-NBA teams, my All-Defensive teams, and my All-Rookie teams, as long as some of the other guys that I will have for defensive things like Defensive Player of the Year and Rookie of the Year, things of that nature. Anyway, guys, that's been me. Thank you for tuning in to my summary of the 23-24 NBA season. I'm out.